Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. Well, Darren and I might get into a little bit of debate today because we're going to talk about what are the best pre-emerge corn herbicides that you could use on your farm for 2021.
That's okay. By the end of the show, Brian will probably agree with me, or who knows? We'll see where that goes. One thing that we will agree about, though, is that micronutrients can make a big difference in your crop and in the health of your livestock, and that's important when it comes to cobalt. It is important for more than just feeding your crop.
We've got a tough to control weed of the week coming up later in the show. We also have an iron talk as well, but first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Your soybeans are in the bin, but the game isn't over yet. Score more points this year by taking your beans to the end zone. At $10 beans, every point of moisture below your target takes away 15 cents per bushel. Reclaim that lost yield with the end zone bin system from Farm Shop MFG.
In our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about an event that we have coming up this summer called the Young Farmers Field Day. This is similar to what we've done the past couple of winters, where we've invited college students to come to the Morton Center on our farm near Baltic, South Dakota, but this year we're moving it later. We'll still have our indoor information sessions, but now we'll be able to go out into the field to give you a hands-on educational experience.
And we'll give you an entire day of what I would consider basic agronomy information, but I'll be honest, even if you are a lifelong farmer, there might be some things there where you go, oh, I didn't really realize that, or maybe that's just a little refresher or whatever. So we'll talk about everything from drainage improvement to fertility to corn and soybean yields and what makes up corn and soybean yields. We'll talk a little about herbicides, fertilizer. There are a number of different things we're going to get into.
There are some fantastic universities, colleges, and tech schools around the country with great ag programs. We strongly encourage you to get a good education. If you're in high school or if you're college age and you say, you know, I really should go get an education on ag, it's worth it. Definitely do that. What our workshop will show you is, all right, here's how you take some of that information and knowledge and put it into practice on the farm, getting higher yields.
Yep, so these will actually be things you'll learn that you can do today on the farm and how they would impact yields. But we, of course, are the weed of the week guys, so we do like to talk about how are we going to control weeds, how are we going to control insects and diseases. So we'll give you a number of ways to do that.
The other great thing about the Young Farmers Field Day is that we'll be awarding college scholarships to attendees that day. Just go to agphd.com to learn how you can be eligible. And whether you're a college student or not, if you want to learn more about ag, we want you to come to the event. To learn more about what we're planning to do and to sign up to come, just go to agphd.com. And another thing you may look for on our website is how to control our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
Success isn't just about maintaining your operation, how you make out for the season, or how much you can get from each acre. It's about doing precisely what needs to be done to feed your crop and grow your legacy, all the way down to the last drop. AgroLiquid Precision Crop Nutrition. Apply less, expect more. Find a retailer at agroliquid.com.
When you apply phosphate fertilizer, it binds to calcium in the soil, becoming calcium phosphate, essentially tooth enamel. How much of this tooth do you think will become available to your crop? NutriCharge doubles your phosphate availability by protecting it from calcium fixation.
How much does your crop residue cost you? Over time, residue accumulates in your field, building excess carbon levels and tying up your plant-available nitrogen. Residue also traps P, K, and micros and can take years to naturally become available to your crops. This is because soil lacks the diverse microbial life needed to break it all down. With Decomp, you can naturally restore life to your soils and allow the release of valuable crop fertility. Learn more at heftyseed.com/naturals.
Pentair High-Pro Ultra-Low Drift nozzles are your ideal choice for the Enlist E3 herbicide system. With coverage comparable to flat fans and with 90% less drift, ULD nozzles meet all required standards for Enlist applications and provide optimal performance of contact herbicides. Learn more at pentair.com/High-Pro.
What I look for in a seed isn't just in the seed.
It's people I trust who get me the solve without the sell.
Who show me where their seed fits, and even where it doesn't. Because the only innovation that matters is the one I need.
With NK Seeds, progress means pushing my potential.
And success matters.
Each year brings new and unique challenges to farming, and your operation needs to constantly adapt to meet them. That's why at AgBiome, we're working every day to bring you new and better solutions. Microbial-based solutions that protect your crop and help it reach its full potential. To learn more about how we're doing it, visit agbiome.com. AgBiome, feeding the world responsibly, partnering with microbes for human benefit.
When I talk to farmers about micronutrients, many times I'll run into a micronutrient that a farmer hasn't even heard of and that he's certainly never applied on his farm. And that's certainly the case with our nutrient today, cobalt, that we're going to feature. If you don't know much about cobalt yet, chances are it's a nutrient that you could benefit from taking a look at a soil test to even find out if you have any cobalt. And if you've got livestock out there, that's of extreme importance for the livestock too.
Okay, so here's the thing. On a standard soil test, is cobalt on there most of the time? No, it's not. How about in a standard tissue test? Nope, not on there either. So it's one of the things that you would need to request. As we start talking about cobalt, please understand, we believe soil pH is more important than cobalt. We believe that NP and K are more important, that sulfur is more important, that magnesium and calcium and many other micronutrients are probably more important than cobalt. So where we're going with this and why we wanted to talk about this a little bit today is, let's say you've done all these things, you've got tremendously high fertility levels, you've taken care of your drainage, you go, man, I'm just looking for, is there one other thing that I should be thinking about? Well, cobalt may be the answer for you.
So if a cobalt reading is not standard on your soil test, you'll have to request one specially from your lab. This is something we've done on our farm in a few areas and a few fields, and we found levels so low they couldn't even detect them because it's something that we haven't been fertilizing for.
In addition to soil tests, whether it's out in your crop field or in your pasture, or plant tissue analysis, wherever you happen to get that, I would just tell you, take a look at how your livestock is doing. If you need supplements for your livestock, that's telling you that your crop is short on micronutrients. So that could be certainly something like zinc maybe, or iron, but it also could be cobalt. Cobalt is tremendously important in livestock health, so this is something you can work with your nutritionist on. But if you're running a little short on cobalt in your livestock, well, it's pretty easy and fairly inexpensive to fertilize out in your field. Yes, there's some broadcast stuff you could do. Maybe it's a cobalt sulphate or something like that, but also with cobalt in a number of different micronutrient blends now, that's what we're using on our farm, by the way. You can do some foliar feeding, you can put it in furrow at planting, you can put it in 2x2 at planting, so a lot of different ways to get cobalt out there. All I know is you don't need much. This isn't something you're going to spend $10, $20, $30 an acre on, but if you spent a few cents, it may be worth it for your crop and especially for your livestock.
Getting the nutritional balance in your soil and in your crop is really important, but so is controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
As a global planter consultant, YieldTrack caught my eye because it was agronomically superior to anything else that I had seen. Things like the potential of increasing corn yields approximately 12 bushel per acre by eliminating the center section compaction and pinch rows that have compaction on both sides of the same row. Improving uniform seed depth and plant emergence by cutting wing movement 50% using walking wing wheels which stabilize row unit movement at higher speeds. Floating bigger seed and fertilizer payloads at a 14 psi or less footprint through innovative design that eliminates weight and improves durability, allowing YieldTrack to be up to 6,000 pounds lighter than other equivalent machines. Contact Norwood Sales to learn more on how to improve your farm's profitability using a YieldTrack planter.
Success isn't just about maintaining your operation, how you make out for the season, or how much you can get from each acre. It's about doing precisely what needs to be done to feed your crop and grow your legacy, all the way down to the last drop. AgroLiquid Precision Crop Nutrition. Apply less. Expect more. Find a retailer at agroliquid.com.
Call it a day.
One more post.
One more bucket.
There's always one more to be done.
One more field.
To be earned. To be found. For us, it always has been. And always will be.
One more bushel.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whenever you want. In your life and on your farm, Case IH AFS Connect gives you more control. Monitor your operation, manage your fleet and your farm data your way. Case IH, rethink productivity.
Nature called, it wants its nutrients back. Don't flush them away. Use it where it's needed, precisely. Topcon has nutrient management technology to help make this process easier. How can you take advantage of this? Let us show you.
When it comes to pre-emerge herbicides for corn, there are a lot of choices, and I mentioned to Brent, I don't know if we have time to cover all this. There's so many things to do. So let's do this. Let's eliminate the things that we wouldn't recommend right away.
Okay, so I want to start with anything containing atrazine. And you might say, wait a second, I'm using atrazine in my pre. I know, but I don't want you to. Roughly half of the pre's in the United States have some atrazine in it. Here's why I don't like it. It has nothing to do with agronomics. It has everything to do with the environment. We just don't want atrazine out there pre-emerge because almost all the atrazine that's ended up in groundwater has traced back to pre-emerge usage. So stop using it pre. Instead, use it post. That's literally all you have to do. If you take that atrazine out of your pre, put it into your post, you'll still get the weed control. Now you're much safer for the environment.
Here's the other thing, Brian, is when I talk to farmers about atrazine premixes, I'll say, well, what rate of that product are you actually putting out? And they'll say, well, I can only get by with a half a pound or a pound of atrazine, so I got to cut the rate on it so I don't get the full rate of the Group 15 that I'd like. Well, why would you put yourself in that spot? The Group 15 is carrying all the weight and doing all the work out there. Why not just use the Group 15 straight rather than being dependent on that blend with atrazine?
All right, so here's the first thing. If you're raising conventional corn, you have to have a full rate of a Group 15. Have to, because you don't have any good option post-emerge, or I should say cheap option post-emerge for grass control. You don't have Roundup available, you don't have Liberty available, you're stuck with Accent. I don't want to spend the money on Accent, and I know you don't either. So just make sure you're using a full rate of a Group 15. Now, when you switch over to traded corn, most of it's Roundup Ready corn in the United States that has a trait. All right, then you've got that Roundup post-emerge, so that changes your thinking a little bit. So now you could get by with a little lower rate of a Group 15 if you want to rescue with that Roundup on the grass. But the Group 15s, by going with a full rate of one of those, you will get better water hemp control. You will get better pigweed control, better kochia control. I'm not saying dramatically better, but you will get better control of all those broadleaf weeds. So that's why we like the full rate of a Group 15.
Now, if you want to have that Group 15 broadleaf component premix, you can certainly do that. I would say this, even in a situation where, hey, that's what I've been doing for years, I would try one field with that full rate of a Group 15, not a cut rate, but a full rate, because you're going to be surprised how much activity you do have on some of those small-seeded broadleaves, whether it's a pigweed species plant or lamb's quarters. You do get pretty good activity. Now, I won't say you get more activity than if you're putting in Sharpen or some of these other things that you can do when you get those combo products.
All right, I mentioned already, don't use atrazine pre. The other one I don't like pre-emerge is the HPPDs. And here's why. If you go out there with something that has an HPPD, Callisto, Laudis, Impact, Armazon, any one of those active ingredients, you've got that in your pre-emerge herbicide. The problem now is you can't use it post. And I love using it post because it costs $3 an acre for the full rate. I like cheap, I like effective. Okay, so instead of using it pre, use something else pre. That's where we like Sharpen as a broadleaf killer. You could certainly go out there with the old Hornet. Triple Flex and Sure Start have the old Hornet. What that is Stinger and Python. Okay, I don't love ALS products pre-emerge either, but Python does have activity on some weeds still, so that's not bad, and having that Stinger out there is okay. Plus, I like Sure Start and Triple Flex because they're so cheap. Triple Flex and Sure Start have Harness or Surpass, whichever, they're the same thing, plus the Stinger and the Python. When you go to Verdict, that's got Outlook plus the Sharpen. Now the problem, like Darren was mentioning, when you do Verdict or when you do Sure Start or Triple Flex, you are getting a cut rate of a Group 15. So if you want to use those products, our suggestion would be buy some straight Group 15 as well and bump the rate of the Group 15. That way you've done everything you can pre-emerge and you haven't burned up what you would like to use post-emerge, which is atrazine and HPPD.
Here's the other thing. When you're using those products with a cut rate of Group 15 and some sort of broadleaf killer, you don't have as much residual. Now you're coming back with a Roundup or maybe Liberty treatment, which have no residual. Well, that makes no sense to me because you're gonna have all kinds of late season weed escapes. So what we're trying to do here is get enough residual herbicide out there that you get season-long weed control.
And the other big thing here is cost. We've got to ultimately look at cost. So that's where post-emerge, if you burn up your HPPD pre, what are you left with post? Well, you still have Roundup, maybe you have Liberty depending on the corn you're raising, but is that going to kill your weeds? No. So now you say,
or you have dicamba, and here's the problem that we ran into in 2020. There were a lot of areas of the country that were forced to spray a little bit later in their corn, and they also planted soybeans really early. So they were hitting flowering much earlier. We saw more dicamba drift issues that actually hurt yield, and it came out of the corn in many cases.
Yep, so then a lot of people say, well, I'll use Status. Well, that still has a little bit of dicamba in there, and yes, the main weed killers, diflufenzapyr post-emerge, but you got some dicamba in there, so you're again left with that risk. So that's where we come back to don't use your HPPD and don't use your atrazine pre. If you save those and use those post-emerge, now you don't have to worry so much about drift.
Okay, well hold on here, because you talk about these HPPD pre's, and we're seeing many of them get marketed as products where, you know what, put half of it on up front, put half of it on post.
Well, you could potentially do that, but I want you to think about this. If you use a half rate of anything, is it as good as a full rate? Usually it's not.
No, but you're only wanting it to last a certain period of time.
Yeah, but I'm talking post-emerge. So if you go with a half rate of Resicor pre and a half rate of Resicor post, well, how much ultimately HPPD did you put out there? Too much in a lot of cases. Okay, I don't want more than 3 ounces of Callisto out there, otherwise I'm worried about the carryover. And Callisto, by the way, the active ingredient's mesotrione. So I still come back to, I don't like that. You can do it if you want to run a low rate pre, but now you're too low pre, you're too low post, and you may have some weed resistance that's starting to build. I don't want to do that. That would not be my recommendation. I also want to come back to, as mentioning cost there, the reason why I like saving the atrazine and the HPPD post instead of having to spray Status post is the Status costs 5 or 6 times as much money as the HPPD. So if you want cheap, you want the cheapest and best program, I'm going with a Group 15 plus either Sharpen, Stinger, Python, something out there for broadleaves. Then post-emerge, I'm going to go HPPD, atrazine, Roundup. Well, that's how I would do it in a lot of cases. I'm not saying this fits in every situation, but it fits on probably 90% of the acres in the United States.
Here's the other thing. You got to be realistic about what you're putting out there. If you've got that broadleaf killer in that product, great. That's going to burn down any broadleaf.
Wait, in which product? In the pre or the post?
In the pre. It's going to burn down any of those broadleaves that are up, but you don't have anything in there to burn down the grass. So if you've got grass that's already emerging, you may need to put some Roundup in there too, just to make sure you kick it out of the way.
Yep, unless it's a tillage situation.
And that leads to my point why I want to get these pre's out there early. You're going to need moisture to activate any of the pre's that we're talking about. And yes, the broadleaf component and in those combination products can burn down broadleaves, but again, you got to get that grass before it starts coming. You need some moisture and you need time to get it out there. So if you're in a dry area, one of the biggest objections I hear from farmers is, well, my pre didn't work so good. And the problem is often you didn't put it out early enough. You thought you were in Illinois and you said, well, I can just plant and spray the stuff the same day, no problem. No, you can't. You got to get it out there a couple weeks ahead so you have time to get some rain to get it working.
If you're in dry country, yes. If you are in Illinois, most of the time, it's going to work fine.
Not always.
No,
not always.
Most of the time, it's going to work if you spray after you plant.
Here's the complaints we get in areas that do normally get rain. Well, my pre didn't work. Well, guess what? If you have irrigation, you got to turn the pivot on, water that ground. Hey, you didn't get rain the first couple days? All right, better water it in and get it going. And if you can't do that, you just can't get away with putting all your eggs in that basket of I'm going to plant and then I'm going to come back later
right. What
and
you
hope
should
I have
do,
time.
If you want it to work with less moisture, you till it in. Till it in lightly. Don't disc it in, but till it in very lightly. And I realize a lot of companies will tell you, oh, don't till it in. They're just worried about streaking and they're worried about you burying it. So as long as you go light, you will have much better performance because now you're taking the herbicide from at the soil surface, putting it down where the weeds are. Now it takes very little rain to get that activated. Otherwise, our next best suggestion after tillage is spray it out 2 weeks or 4 weeks before planting. Our final suggestion and the worst case scenario is yes, you can apply it after you've planted, but that is the riskiest situation because you got to have rain and you got to have it quickly.
Here's the other tricky thing, Brian, is there's so many rebate programs out there and some of them have big dollars or 0% financing offers where it's kind of attractive to switch a pre this year.
Yep, and the other thing is there are a lot of generics out there for many of these products, so you've got to weigh this all out and say, okay, if I buy the name brand and I get the rebate, how does that dollar out compared to the generic? Look at all these things, make sure you're asking your dealer about, well, what if it doesn't work? Is there any service policy after that? There isn't with the generics, there would be with the name brand, so just weigh those things out. But the number one thing that I wanted to tell you is we've got to be smart with our dollars and you got to look at which weeds will each of these herbicides control. So if the product you spend money on controls weeds that you don't have on your farm, who cares? You've spent the money on something that you didn't need. And there are plenty of companies out there that are just trying to sell you stuff because that's what they've got. That's why we're trying to help you understand, use a Group 15, use Sharpen or Sting or Python, something like that, along with that in a lot of cases, but keep that Group 15 rate high. Then save your HPPD and atrazine post. Sure, you can always go with Status. Status is the very best product post-emerge. It costs a lot of money. So you want to save that for just the acres you need it and not burn up your HPPD pre. So now post-emerge, you're stuck with either I got to spend all kinds of money on Status or I got to go with a high drift and high injury product in dicamba.
And you may want to have some great post-emerge options, especially if you have our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Weed of the week is common knotweed.
It's an annual weed, and we often see this one in compacted areas, in areas with poor crop canopy, along the edges of roads, especially along those grass paths at the edge of fields. We see common knotweed there. But it's easy to control, Brian, so there's no reason to let common knotweed take things over.
Yeah, and the number one way to control it is with crop canopy. So if you just raise a great crop, have good drainage, good fertility, thicker planting population, you'll choke this thing out real easy. Otherwise, in terms of spray, I really like dicamba or 2,4-D, but the biggest issue we see is people running too low a rate. If you go to the hardware store and buy some watered down junk, it's not gonna work. Get the real stuff, use a good strong rate, and you'll get excellent control on common knotweed.
It can creep out into your field, so in soybeans, use the 3 pre's down with the PPO, one of the yellows, and metribuzin. Follow up with Roundup or Liberty, and you're just gonna smoke this stuff. In wheat, I like Sharpen Down. It does a great job burning down down, common knotweed, and it has good residual. Post-emerge, I like Husky.
Yeah, wide match isn't too bad either. In corn, I would suggest verdict down. You could follow post-emerge with status. Otherwise, an HPPD plus atrazine is not too bad either.
That's all the time we have for this week's Weed of the Week, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Across the country and across county lines, no two operations are alike. You make the right decisions for the right acres, and no decision is more important than what you choose to plant. Introducing Extend Flex soybeans, elite genetics, now with the addition of glufosinate tolerance, giving you the yield you want with the choice you need. Extend Flex soybeans.
Find love, and then give it all away. Find love, then give it all away.
Who says harvest should be the only rewarding part of a season? Sure, ending a successful year of planning and planting is a very gratifying moment. But with the Bayer Plus Rewards program on your side, it doesn't have to be the only one. By helping you earn and redeem cash back on seed, herbicides, and other eligible products you use throughout the entire season, you can reap the benefits all year round. So contact your retailer to learn how to get more from your crops and put more in your wallet. Bayer Plus. Rewards are always in season.
My name is Amos Smith. I'm a fourth-generation dairy farmer in Western New York. We considered strip till about 3 years ago. We usually have a wider harvest window because we're not compacting the soil and we're not faced with too mellow a soil in the fall. The soils are a lot healthier. The machine, it's definitely rugged. It's a great system overall. It's a good fit for our operation.
Your soybeans are in the bin, but the game isn't over yet. Score more points this year by taking your beans to the end zone. If your beans went in the bin at low moisture, you can naturally rehydrate to reclaim lost yield with the End Zone fan control system from Farm Shop MFG. At $10 beans, every point of moisture below your target takes away 15 cents per bushel. That means raising 9% moisture beans to 13 can increase your profits by 60 cents per bushel. Score more yields in the End Zone from Farm Shop MFG.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whenever you want. In your life and on your farm, Case IH AFS Connect gives you more control. Monitor your operation, manage your fleet and your farm data your way. Case IH. Rethink productivity.
If you don't want to miss a beat this upcoming season, make sure your software is up to date. We'll discuss it in today's Iron Talk. It never fails. I'll be working with someone who's trying to plant or trying to spray, and they're having trouble with their computer control system. Well, it's really no surprise that computers have problems from time to time. Many of those problems can be eliminated by keeping your software up to date. At least once per year, most of the computer control systems and other software you're using on the farm will have an update. It's up to you to get this done before you start running into problems and losing valuable time in the field. Unfortunately, the updates aren't always like those on your phone that happen automatically. Now, it's getting better all the time, but you still have to take charge and make sure you get it done. Most of the updates now are available online, so you don't have to leave your house or office to get them. However, there are still some of the companies that want you to come to their dealer in order to update the software. Fortunately, almost all of these updates are free. You just have to take the time to do them now so you don't have problems in the field down the road. So reach out to your equipment and software providers right away so you don't forget. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
That's our time for today, but if you're looking for more agronomic information, we'd encourage you to check out the Ag PhD radio show at 2 p.m. Central each weekday on SiriusXM Channel 147, where we take your live phone calls and answer your emails.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.